My younger sister, Elisa, and I have our birthdays only a few days apart, so we have always had to share our birthday parties, even though I am 5 years younger. Being the older sister, basically every year it was whatever Elisa wanted, and honestly I was sick of it. I always felt like a last-minute accident since my parents all the time had Elisa much more in mind than me. This drove me crazy, so I decided that this year would be different. That year was finally my 18th birthday, and I didn't need any more family parties. I called my parents aside and told them to just have a party for Elisa, as I would rather go on a camping trip with my friends. At first, my parents seemed to understand where my sudden occurrence was coming from. Deep down, they knew how much they favored my sister, and were about to give me their permission when Jenny burst into the room and demanded that I stay for her party. My sister went into a complete meltdown and started screaming about how I was ruining her special day. Her attitude was very selfish and obviously over the top, but my parents had to humor her as usual. They said Elisa could have her birthday alone if I didn't want to be a part of it, but she could also come with me on the camping trip. I couldn't believe it. They wanted to make it seem like this was in my favor. But in reality, it just meant that Elisa now had 2 parties instead of 1. I was very angry, but I had to leave with Elisa or I wouldn't get any presents. I went up to my room very upset and called my boyfriend Trevor to tell him the bad news. He seemed really disappointed and suggested that we reschedule for next weekend, but I was done changing my plans, so I told him, no, this Friday Elisa and I get to camp. He finally agreed and we arranged to meet at the camp. My sister and I arrived at the camp as arranged, and Trevor was waiting there to meet us, but I didn't see any of our other friends. He sheepishly told us that everyone else canceled after learning that my sister was coming. Sure they did, Elisa said, refusing to believe she was so nasty. Instead, she accused him of not inviting them himself. It was a strange thing to say, but Trevor, unfortunately, hated it when people corrected him, so the conversation quickly turned into an argument. Eventually, I had to step in and told Isa to wait in the store while Trevor and I went for a walk. She argued for a second, but then relented. I had to say some pretty mean things to her to get her to stay, and in the end she reluctantly agreed, so we left her there. Trevor and I had been in this area several times before, so I wasn't really paying attention to where we were. I just followed my boyfriend, and eventually we came to a clearing I didn't recognize. The trees were especially gnarled in that spot, and there was a deep crack in the ground, wide enough for someone to fall through and about 4 meters deep. It looked as if the ground had given way in that part and some sort of natural gully opened up there. Surely this was not a good place to stop, but Trevor must have thought it was, because he spread out a picnic blanket on the uneven ground and put cheese and crackers in front of it, and we started talking and eating. It felt great to be away from everyone, just the 2 of us. I was still disappointed that the rest of our friends didn't come, but honestly, it was better this way. Trevor and I were so comfortable together, but I noticed something strange. Trevor kept mentioning Elisa and my family, and no matter how hard I tried to change the subject, he kept twisting the conversation to how much he prioritizes my family over everyone else. I had never realized how much that bothered him. Everything had started out great, but as the conversation progressed and he kept getting hooked on that topic, his mood kept getting worse. He kept getting darker and darker, and he was ruining our perfect picnic. I had seen him break out in his little fits of anger before, but they had never been directed at me. I tried to calm him down, explain that I would have less family pressure now that I was 18, but he didn't seem to listen to me. It was like he wanted to get into an argument anyway, and honestly, arguing with him was the last thing I wanted that night. So I got up and started to walk away, but then he jumped to his feet and grabbed me by my sweatshirt. "Let me go, I want to go," I yelled at him, but he kept holding me down. Trevor was trying to forcefully restrain me, and I began to struggle. He was being very aggressive, holding me tighter than necessary. He was out of his mind, and for the first time since we had been together over a year ago, I was afraid of him. At one point, Trevor started talking my arms and leading me back to the blanket. I was trying as hard as I could to get loose and yelling at him to let go. But he was holding me tighter and tighter, until at one point his fury just boiled over, and he started slapping me repeatedly. At this moment, I was both shocked and terrified. This was not the Clover I knew. I always knew he had a temper, but this bout of aggression I had never seen before. Fearing for my life, I began to call my sister, but I knew we were too far away for her to hear me. Normally, she would have followed us, but after the way I demanded she stay in the store, I knew she would stay there. "I'll never let you go," she said, as if freaking out. "Is that what you want, to abandon me to go with someone else?" And with that, she pushed me very hard, throwing me over the edge of the crevice. I hadn't realized how close I was to the crevasse until my shoulder slammed into the edge of the rock, and then I fell about 4 meters into the hole. My whole left side was screaming in pain. That was a dark and narrow chasm. I felt like I was in a grave. There were roots sticking out of the walls, and these looked strong enough to climb up them and back up, so I grabbed one and pulled. But I didn't have the strength to pull myself up because one of my arms had definitely broken. I looked up and found Trevor, who was looking down with an angry look that contrasted with the smile on his mouth, which made him look very sinister, like some kind of demon. "Looks like you're stuck there now, don't you? That's what you get for being spoiled and trying to defy me. Now I'm the only one who knows you're trapped in there." I begged him to help me out, but he just shook his head and told me he wouldn't until I learned who was in charge, and that I should never defy him like that again. At that point, he sat on the edge of the crevasse with his legs dangling just out of my reach and explained what would happen next. He would go back to Elisa and tell her I was lost. Then he would make sure to send the search teams in the opposite direction, and every day he would come back to visit me with food that he would drop in the hole. I was going to say something else, but just as he was explaining his crazy plan, I suddenly heard a bump. And Trevor stopped talking, gasped for a second, and then fell forward into the hole, and I had to step aside so he wouldn't fall on me, because unlike me, he landed on his head. As Trevor lay lying unconscious a few steps away from me inside the crevice, I looked up and saw Elisa standing at the edge of the hole, a large wooden stick in her hand. She had hit him with the wood and then pushed him into the ditch. "I was following you," she said. "I knew you shouldn't trust him." Then she plucked a branch from a tree that had fallen a few feet away, and with it helped me out of the crevice by holding it with one arm. It was quite hard to do, as my right shoulder was dislocated and I could only support myself with my left hand and arm. But I held onto the branch very tightly as Elisa pulled me up, and when I was finally within her reach, she grabbed my shirt and pulled me the rest of the way up. We sat together on the edge of that dark well, and she wrapped me in a tight hug. Then Elisa shone the flashlight on her phone down to the bottom, and we saw that Trevor remained unconscious. But we noticed he was breathing, so we knew it was a matter of time before he woke up. So we got to our feet, walked back to the camp, and called the police. About 15 to 20 minutes later, we saw the lights of a patrol car approaching. We led the cops to the crevasse, and when we arrived, Trevor had already woken up and was desperately trying to get out. But as karma is unforgiving, he also had a completely dislocated arm from the fall, so he couldn't get out no matter how hard he tried. When he saw the officers, Trevor tried to play the victim and make them believe that my sister and I had set him up to kill him, but that I was not making any sense. First of all, because we were the ones who called the police, and secondly, because the bruises and the marks of his hands on my arms and face after slapping me several times spoke for themselves. When we were on our way home, I thanked my sister for what I had done, despite how rude I was to her. And I also apologized for my bad attitude regarding her birthday. She told me I had nothing to apologize for, and after that we started talking about her own birthday party next week, which was going to have a farm theme, an idea I really hated, but of course I would be there after all. We are sisters, and I will always be there for her, as I know she will be there for me. That should have been nothing more than a simple school trip and an accidental mishap that should have been solved with little more than a single night of discomfort, i.e., no blood. But that's not what happened. Budget hostels are always places of unrest and danger, generally run down by the action of the large number of people of all sorts who have passed through them, unfortunate people who do not have the money to afford decent accommodation. This makes them places no one wants to visit unless, of course, they have no choice. In 2017, I and 15 others in my class were on an expeditionary trip to Malaysia to learn more about their culture. This for the sake of a minor geography exam that in the end was not worth the risk we all had to go through. The trip began relatively calmly. The general mood of the group was one of excitement at the prospect of escaping an average, boring day at school, in exchange for escaping to a land none of us knew. At the time, we were all boys between the ages of 16 and 17, and we set out on this trip under the care of 2 of our teachers. Since being minors, we could not travel without parental permission and the care of an adult, a peer in this case. We landed at the airport around 4 a.m., and the place was still packed with a variety of visitors who, like us, were also looking to explore the depths of the Malaysian jungle, as well as immerse themselves in the city life, which was most of our main reasons for going on the trip in the first place. We were also surprised to learn that we were not the only group of school students who were undertaking that adventure. There were at least a couple of other school groups. After boarding a bus and driving for a couple of hours, I suddenly felt a loud jolt coming from the bottom of the vehicle. We must have hit something that caused the tires to shred, because we quickly began to slow down until we finally came to a stop on the outskirts of a small town, a couple of miles outside the main city. The teachers talked to the bus driver about what happened, and the 3 of them got off to examine the damage. When they returned inside, they notified us all of the situation. "Sorry guys, we think some kind of rock must have hit a tire on the way up and deflated it. The repair crew won't be here until at least tonight, so we'll have to get off the bus and stay at this lodge the driver told me about a kilometer out of town." Our eyes darted back and forth between the driver and the teacher, all of us feeling the same sense of anxiety about staying in such a desolate place, if only for one night. For my part, I just didn't feel safe, regardless of the group. Once the teacher finished his explanation, we all got off, grabbed our bags, and wandered through the empty street of the town, looking for the so-and-so hostel the driver was talking about. We finally managed to find it after only 10 minutes of walking, and I thanked God that it was so close. However, upon arriving at the site, my already low enthusiasm dropped even lower when I saw where we would have to spend the night. The place looked incredibly run down, ravaged by time and standing on nothing but wooden planks, keeping its structure stable. "This is the place everyone is headed to, and I'll talk to the owners," the master said, as we all stood mute and staring at the destroyed place. We went up to the shared sleeping area, and lucky for us, there were a few bunks available, but these were in a horrible state, and the others were occupied by some people who, frankly, didn't look the best in the world, but beyond that were perfect strangers. In the bottom bunk of the bunk I was supposed to sleep in, there was a person I couldn't detail because he was submerged under a pile of blankets. Of course, this did not make me happy at all, and honestly, I felt quite uncomfortable. But I had no choice. There was nowhere else I could stay, since basically we all had to share a bunk with some stranger. The teacher finally came upstairs and announced that we would only be here for one night and would be leaving first thing in about 5 hours, so around 7 a.m. I reluctantly climbed up to the top bunk with a stranger sleeping on the bottom. The stranger below me was still submerged in his blanket. At first it made me uncomfortable not being able to see his face, but after a time of struggle and confusion with my futile attempts to enter the very land of sleep, I began to hear noises, muted moans, and combined with a mournful silence coming from below. These only seemed to amplify in volume, and this only ratified to me that this would be a long and sleepless night. I spread the blanket over my shivering body and extremely disconcerted by the sounds coming from below, which didn't seem to be natural either. The moans seemed too lifeless to be. Maybe it was just in my head, or so I wanted to think. An hour later, I was about to feel my eyes close from sheer fatigue, but then I heard again. This time the sound didn't come from below. It came from beside my bunk, which rose to a height of about 5 to 7 feet, which meant that anyone at that height must have been standing directly in front of my sleeping body and could have easily grabbed me. I decided it was foolish to imagine such things and turned to look out. Then terror gripped me as I saw a pair of eyes staring at me, but not as a normal stare, but as their eyes tried to pierce me. I froze in panic. I couldn't move a single muscle. I was completely terrified. It was very dark, and I could hardly make out any of his features, but I know it was a man, and his silhouette was that of someone tall and sturdy. While I was still in shock, in one swift movement the man placed his huge hand over my mouth, and suddenly I felt another hand crawling under my blanket. I was still terrified beyond belief, but at that moment my vocal cords reacted instinctively, and a panicked scream rose from my throat, but was silenced by the stranger's huge hand. I began to struggle and writhe to get his filthy hands away from me, but he was bigger and had much more strength than I did. At one point, however, I managed to pull his hand away from my mouth for an instant, which was enough for me to let out a scream so loud that it echoed throughout the room. Every sleeping body rose up in a jerking motion, and whoever was standing next to my bed rushed out of the room in a hurry. My master jumped out of bed and tried to catch up with him, but when he left the room, he realized that the door to the lodge was wide open and the night breeze was blowing in, making it clear that this disgusting person had escaped, and trying to chase him in this unfamiliar place was not only futile, but could be dangerous. We were out of the building in just over an hour. After alerting the owners, they called the police and reported the incident. They also apologized profusely, but it did nothing to calm the immense distress we were in, especially me, who was still very shaken after that disgusting man tried to touch me. We left town early in the morning. Fortunately, the car had been repaired, and we were back on the road. But we were all so shocked by the incident that the rest of the trip, instead of being fun, was filled with anxiety. We basically spent the rest of the trip looking everywhere and feeling in danger of anything. But there was something that worried us even more, and that was that this disgusting and clearly dangerous man was now on the loose in that town, probably looking for his next victim. I really pray to God that the police have managed to track him down, and he is now behind bars and not out there harming other innocent people. In the meantime, this trip will forever remain in my memory as the worst trip of my life. This all happened about 5 years ago, when I met Barbara at a party at a mutual friend's house. We hit it off immediately, and the chemistry between us was almost instantaneous. It all started when we were both picked for the same beer pong team at the party. Our friend introduced us and we started chatting. We stayed together throughout the night, and before we left the party, she gave me her Snapchat. We spent the next week exchanging videos. At first it was casual, mostly memes and videos of whatever we were doing at the time using silly filters on them, i.e., things like me sending Barbara a picture of me making breakfast and then putting a psychedelic lens on my face that made me look like a hippie. It was pretty funny. But after about a week, Barbara started sending me more flirty snaps. Nothing wild, just things like throwing me a kiss at the end of a video or using a heart emoji filter. I was vibing with that because she was beautiful. Dark hair, dark eyes, and a very slender figure. How could I not be attracted? One afternoon, I was sitting on my couch playing video games, by which time we had probably exchanged about 100 snaps before I saw the face in the background. Then I got the snap from her. "Hey David, what do you think of my new earrings?" Barbara asked in a video. She was sitting at her kitchen table with some sort of pirate filter, and also added big fake gold earrings and an eye patch. So far so normal and fun as usual, but just as I was finishing the snap, I noticed that there was something in the background of the video, like a shadowy figure at the end of the kitchen. But unfortunately, the snap disappeared before I had a chance to think about taking a screenshot. It was hard for me to decipher exactly what that was in the background because of the bad lighting and filter, but it looked like a face on the wall. The face was ugly, old, but hard to make out in detail because it was dark. But it was like that of a completely weeping man, with thick, hard features and eyes that seemed to look right through you. His mouth was closed, and I could have even sworn a red streak on his chin. I decided to ask Barbara as soon as possible. "Hey, did you recently install a creepy portrait in your kitchen?" Barbara answered me immediately. "I don't know what you're talking about, Dave," she said as she shot a quick video tour of her kitchen. "You're weird, but luckily you're cute." I felt the blood run cold in my veins. Barbara's snapshot showed me the wall where I thought I'd seen the man's portrait, but instead of a painting, there was a window. "Hey, I'm serious now," I replied. "I think a man might have been looking through your kitchen window." Now she seemed nervous and a little angry in her response. This time she didn't bother to use any filters. "Dave, if you're messing with me, that's not right. You don't mess with something like that." This last video had Barbara walking in her living room. All her curtains were open and I could see the night sky clearly around her house. I also noticed a shadow outside in her yard. This time I was quick enough to take a screenshot of the end of the video and sent it to her. She sent me back a chat instead of a video. "Okay, now I'm freaking out a little," she wrote. "Can you come over?" I had been waiting for that invitation for a while, but not exactly like that. Before I could respond, I got a notification that she sent a video, immediately opened it, and now I saw her clearly panicking. Barbara was running down her hallway. "David, I saw someone outside." They ran through the willow tree across the street and around the side of the house. "I'm not sure, but there might have been 2 shadows out there," Barbara said, about to burst into tears from panic. I quickly replied, "Hey, here's my FaceTime. Call me and I'll stay on the line with you." She called a few moments later from her room. The lights were off and I could see from the glow of the screen that Barbara was now crying. "There's someone outside my room," she whispered. "I heard them trying to open the window. David, please, 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 I'm so scared." Goodness gracious, this was very frightening. It's okay, just calm down a little bit, I'm going to..." The rest of the words died in my mouth when I heard someone banging on Veronica's front door, banging it hard enough to rattle her bedroom window. I heard several screams, but they were muffled, and it was impossible to decipher what they were saying. After a moment, the pounding stopped and there was silence. Then Veronica screamed, and before I could ask what was going on, she turned her camera to point at her bedroom window. A man was leaning out looking in, the same man I had seen at her kitchen window. His face was pale and up close, clearly stained with blood on his chin and cheeks. Barbara ripped open the curtain and began to hyperventilate. Hey, listen. You need to stay quiet, stay hidden, lock your bedroom door, and put something heavy against the window too. Now you need to hang up on this call, okay? I'm going to call 911. No, please. she whispered, breathing harder. "Don't leave me alone, I beg you." "Barbara, I promised you I wouldn't, but you have to call 911, and I'll call them too and make sure they send the police. Take a picture of your address and I'll leave right away for your house," I assured him, trying to get him to calm down. "Please hurry." Barbara hung up, and instantly I received a chat notification. I was already on my way out the door, slipping off my boots and jacket, when I connected with 911. The dispatcher confirmed that they were already on the line with Barbara and had already alerted the authorities. I sent her a quick Snapchat video instead of FaceTime. "Hey, I'm on my way, and so are the police. You'll be fine," I said, getting into my truck. I drove fast and arrived at Barbara's house in less than 10 minutes. There were 2 squad cars parked around the bend when I pulled into her driveway. There was also a dead man lying in the front yard, face down in the grass, with an axe still embedded in his back near the top of his spine. As I approached, I saw that the guy was bald and very pale. At that moment, there was 1 officer standing near the body talking on his radio, and 2 more on the front porch of the house trying to calm Barbara down. The first officer started to take a step to block me, but she saw him and ran down the steps, jumping into my arms and hugging me tightly. She was sobbing so hard I couldn't understand what she was saying. I hugged her back, of course, but my attention was on the body lying in the yard. I saw the first policeman lean over to shine a light on her face, and saw that the corpse was definitely the man I had seen looking through Barbara's window, i.e., the stalker, the possible home invader. I doubted she was wild enough and composed enough to take an axe to the man's back, and the police don't use those methods. So who killed him? The answer became clear when more patrol cars arrived. I took Barbara away from the scene to try to get her to calm down. We stopped 3 houses down, and when I was finally able to get her to calm down a bit, I let a paramedic look at her. As I walked down the street, this time a police officer stopped me at the edge of the yard of another house, and I saw that a crime scene tech was marking an open door of that house with black and yellow tape. That's when I could see a woman's body lying on the living room floor before I was taken from the scene. The rest of the story came out in the newspaper that same week. It turned out that Barbara's neighbors, a middle-aged couple who had just moved in, were brutally murdered the same night she and I were exchanging snaps. The wife died at the scene, but the husband was able to flee and most likely went next door for help. Only Barbara's family was on vacation, so he jumped the gate, went into Barbara's yard trying to get away from the killer who was chasing him. That was the man lying in the front yard. He probably tried to get her attention quietly at first, but then started banging on the door when he realized he was being followed, then ran to her window, but she didn't respond either. That's when the killer must have caught up with him and planted an axe in his back as the man tried to run across the yard. I know Barbara feels a lot of guilt for not opening the door, but how could she have known that her stalker was really a victim? Besides, all that could have changed was that the police found 3 bodies instead of 2. When I was 20 years old, I set out on a cross-country road trip. I didn't have any particular destination in mind. I was just tired of being stuck in my hometown my whole life. So once I saved up some money and gathered some supplies, I hit the road and never looked back. The thing was, I didn't have a car and I didn't have enough money for a bus ticket either, so I just walked or asked for rides from whoever I could. That often meant hitchhiking. I lost count of how many times I got a ride from one place to another just by giving a thumbs up. There is a big stigma about hitchhiking, but in almost all of my experiences, everything went well. Of course, many of the female travelers I met along the way pointed out that being a man makes it much safer, but I'm not so convinced of that. So I still had certain precautions, always kept my wits about me, and always knew exactly where my knife and axe were at all times. But up to that point, with almost 9 days of Trevicia already, I had done pretty well. Unfortunately, my luck ran out one day when I got stuck in Fresno trying to get to another city in California. It didn't matter which city it was, as long as it was easier to make money there. Because as I told you, I didn't have a plan, just touring the country basically with no money. That afternoon, I stood on the side of the road with my big travel backpack and gave the usual thumbs up. A guy in an old pickup truck pulled over and said he was heading north about 40 miles, which was fine with me. I immediately noticed that the guy was really fat, probably weighed over 300 pounds and also looked gross and scruffy. But at that point, I hadn't showered in a long time, so I was in no position to judge, so I just jumped in the car we got in and immediately hit the road. We didn't even make it through the introductions without some serious red flags popping up. The man asked me where I was headed, and I explained that what I was doing, so wherever he dropped me off was fine. Then he asked me my name. I replied that my name was Kai, and out of politeness I asked him his, to which he replied, "My mother called me Jet, but that's because I didn't quite know who I was. My real name is Jesus." "You mean Jesus Christ?" I asked, to which he replied very effusively, "Yes, boy, Jesus Christ himself, that's me." At that point I thought, okay, here we go. The guy was nuts, but this wasn't the first time with a nutcase on the road. I'd already been in a car with another nutcase who was visited every night by aliens and spouted all sorts of conspiracy theories. So I just rolled my eyes and indulged him with a bit of healthy skepticism. "It can't be true, man, I don't believe it." "Oh no? Then how come I picked you up and gave you a ride in my car for nothing in return?" I was amused by his reasoning. I said, "Well, a lot of people have done it, man." "Yeah, right," he told me incredulously. "If you were a girl, maybe I'd believe you, but never mind." We sat in silence for a while. I thought about asking to be let out earlier, but I had a feeling that would upset him, which would not be a smart move on my part. I tried to sit and bear it. Unfortunately, this guy was obviously a talker. I knew he was eager to tell me more things, and finally he blurted out a question about travel. He said he traveled all over the world, healing people, saving people everywhere he went, and spreading the word of God. I never left the country before, so I couldn't refute anything he said about cities and other countries, but clearly, his speech was full of unbelievable things. But eventually things took an even worse turn. "What's your favorite place out of all the ones you visited, Kai?" Probably New Orleans," I said. But what he said next really was unexpected. Good choice, boy. But I have to say the Virgin Islands really lives up to its name, you know. Have you ever been with a virgin, Kai? Trust me, the younger the better." He then started telling me about his adventures with 13, 14, and 15-year-old girls in the Virgin Islands, and then told me he had lots of pictures in the glove compartment and insisted I look at them. I flatly refused to look at whatever illegal junk was in the glove compartment, but he kept pushing me until it turned into a shouting match inside the car, and finally said he would take the pictures himself, then walked over to me, opened the glove compartment and started going through it, completely taking his eyes off the road. The car began to swerve to the right shoulder, and with his huge body across, I couldn't even reach the steering wheel to straighten the car out. "Watch the road," I shouted to him, almost in a panic, seeing that we could crash at any moment. But he had his full attention on looking for the surely disgusting pictures he had in the glove compartment. That's when I saw the park work truck on the shoulder just ahead of us. We were heading straight for it. The lights were flashing and there were men outside, oblivious to the danger heading towards them. I yelled at the man as we pulled off the shoulder and into the grass, about to crash into the trees. Finally, he noticed and tried to get back in his seat and get us back on the road, but he turned the steering wheel too far and lost control. The brakes locked up as we ran straight into the back of the work truck, and because of the speed we were going, the poor soul standing there didn't have time to react. The only thing I remember was the airbags going off. I was too stunned for a few seconds. But when my head cleared, I saw the horrible scene before me. It almost made me pass out. The worker was trapped between the car and the truck, screaming in agony. I cursed the creep Jet and told him to get his fat ass out of the car and help, but he just sat there staring straight ahead in shock. I got out of the car as soon as possible and tried to help the worker, but as soon as I saw what the impact had done to him, I knew there was nothing I could do. His legs were completely crushed, lost in a pile of twisted metal, and he was beginning to lose consciousness as I saw blood starting to come out of his mouth and ears. A moment later, a woman came running to the scene. She was on the phone with 911 and asking me questions, but I was still too shocked by the accident to remember exactly what she said. She was thin and, although she was an adult, she had a youthful appearance. This reminded me of the creep who was still in the car, and just then, he got out of the car and ran straight at her. Apparently, the shock caused any trace of sanity he had left to disappear, if that was even possible. And then he tackled her and threw himself on top of her in a huge bear hug. She was pinned between the pavement and the huge body of this degenerate, who seemed to have completely lost his mind and didn't realize the place and situation he was in to try to rip the poor girl's clothes off. She started screaming and dropped her phone, trying to hit him to get him to let go, but he was out of his mind. He looked like a hungry animal. I couldn't believe what he was trying to do in broad daylight. If I wanted to, I figured I'd snap his neck like a twig at any moment, so I ran to the car and pulled my axe out of my bag, then went straight at them, and without thinking, I drove the axe into the back of Jet's head, who, just as I figured, was trying to strangle the girl. But as crazy as it sounds, this didn't stop him. He was still squeezing her neck even with the axe in his head. It looked like a scene from a horror movie, so I pulled it out and hit him again, and I had to hit him several more times before his body collapses on the woman, who was crying and coughing in shock. As best I could, I moved Jet's huge body off the girl and asked him if he was okay. The blood had spilled over her face, and I noticed that the shirt she was wearing was now in tatters and the upper half of her body was now exposed. So I quickly removed the t-shirt she was wearing and gave it to her to cover herself. I did my best to comfort her, but she had withdrawn into some sort of mental shell, and no wonder. I looked around me and it was a surreal scene. 2 dead men, a traumatized woman, and me in the middle, wondering how the hell I got into that chaos. After the police and paramedics arrived, they questioned me and the girl, and upon hearing our testimonies and corroborating with the scene, they absolved me of any guilt. Then the journalists arrived, and I also told them what happened. The news was all over the media, and some began to say that I was a hero, while others thought that attacking Jet with the axe had been excessive. Perhaps they were partly right, but that was what I had at hand, and in the desperation of the moment, I just did what my survival instinct told me. I was not even thinking about my actions. All I wanted was to stop this degenerate. It was only after everything was over, when I began to be aware of the fact that I had killed a human being, even though he was not very human. As you can imagine, that was the end of my adventure. After that, I returned home feeling that it had been the worst idea of my life, and although I lived very nice moments and did very interesting things in that journey, that horrible and traumatic incident is all I remember when I think about it. This story happened to me on a Saturday night. It happened when I was with my girlfriend, who I will call Maya for this story. I was sitting on my bed watching TV, while she was on her laptop working on a school report for English class that was due the following Monday, which kept her busy on the laptop for most of the weekend. My parents were out of town, so we had the house to ourselves, which was great. I would like to point out that Maya and I were polar opposites of each other. I say this because she was a goth who fantasized about dark and morbid things, while I was the complete opposite. However, our different personalities didn't stop us from having a nice relationship and getting along well. We had been together for almost a year. Now I would also like to point out that Maya was extremely socially awkward if she talked to anyone other than me. There was a time when I invited her to a family dinner with my parents. She was understandably shy at first, but as the evening progressed, she turned out to be less awkward than I anticipated. However, at one point, the conversation turned to things we wanted to do, what each of us liked, and such things, and at one point, near the end of the dinner, my dad asked her, "Maya, if you could have anything in the world besides Jack, i.e., me, what would it be?" She hesitated a bit in her answer, and then said, I don't know if I feel comfortable answering that. What do you mean by what else? My dad explained, I mean, do you want more than just my son? Harold, stop it, I was making her uncomfortable. My mom intervened, then turned to Maya and said, Honey, you can tell us only if you want to, otherwise it's okay. You're not obligated to answer questions you're not comfortable with. I could tell Maya was getting uncomfortable with the impromptu questioning my parents decided to do by the look on her face. However, she sheepishly replied, Well, to be honest, it's complicated to explain, maybe you won't understand me. Now, I was a little surprised by that statement. I thought I knew all about her, but now I was intrigued. I decided to intervene by saying, what do you mean by Maya? That's when things took a very strange turn. Lisa says, Wouldn't you like to be able to resurrect your dead loved ones? Sure. I mean, I guess I would do that with my family, said my dad, but something told me Maya wasn't talking about some family member. I found Maya quite strange from that day on, but I didn't want to make a big deal out of it. She was weird in and of herself, and I loved her just the way she was. But soon, that statement she made at dinner would make a lot of sense to me. As I sat on the edge of my bed, I could tell that Maya was tired of the monotony of the report that had kept her busy for several days, so I told her to stop for a while, and we headed to the balcony for a smoke to relax. I pulled out special cigarettes from my nightstand, the ones that aren't exactly tobacco. I lit one and we started smoking as we looked out over the horizon on top of my bedroom balcony. Halfway through, Maya suddenly makes a strange comment saying that it would be great if she could see Matt again. Matt was Maya's ex. I thought it was pretty strange that she would say such a thing, considering the fact that we had both been dating for a year. At that point, we had signed enough, so I figured she was just out of her mind, but unfortunately, that didn't stop me from telling her what I thought, as, upon thinking about it, I started to feel angry. So in a not-so-nice way, I blurted out, Well, go see him then. If you miss him so much and are so desperate to see him, go and meet him, I don't care. She gave me a death glare as if she wanted to throw me off the balcony, then turned her eyes to the horizon again and took another cigarette. After that, there was a long pause of awkward silence, but then I had a moment of nostalgia. I remembered Maya mentioning something about Matt's death just before we started dating. The reason for his death was due to undisclosed reasons, but what happened was that he ended up getting run over by the train going through town. No one knows what he was doing there that night. It is not known if someone did it or if it was an accident, or if he simply wanted to make an attempt on his life, but what is certain is that it was a terrible tragedy. And from what Maya told me, it was something very hard for her. Now everything made sense. She was just expressing that she wanted to see Matt again, since he was no longer here with us and it was just him, her ex, who she was referring to when she answered to my dad. I can't say that thinking about that didn't give me a pang in my heart, but I understood that this person had been very important in Maya's life, and perhaps because of the way he died, she still hadn't been able to fully get over that loss. Being aware of this and what I had just done, I tried to make amends with her. After all, I had acted like an idiot by telling her all those things. I basically told her to die and that I wouldn't care. As we stood in silence, I moved a little closer to her and reached out my arm to slip it behind her shoulders and pull her to me. But she quickly slapped my hand away and aggressively said, "He was better than you anyway." I had gotten into arguments with Maya in the past, but I could tell she was at her boiling point this time. Without giving me a chance to apologize or say anything else, she stormed out of my house and immediately jumped into her car, slamming the gas pedal so hard that the tires screeched on the street. Despite being the wrong one in the situation, I stupidly shouted from the balcony saying, "Okay, have fun trolling Tinder, loser. Oh, and I hope you finally get to reconnect with your beloved Matt." Then I turned around and started to walk away. Eventually, I went back to my room and continued watching TV for about 5 minutes, but later, I couldn't help but feel very guilty about what I did. That's when I decided to send Maya a text message saying, "Please come back to my house. I don't want to fight with you anymore. I know I behaved badly and said hurtful things to you, so I apologize for that. Let's just put it behind us and go back to the way things used to be, please. I still have a free spot in my bed in case you want to forget about it too and go back to enjoying our weekend." A couple of minutes go by and I get no response. And that's when I start to get more anxious, and I kept contemplating if I should call Maya. But I didn't want to subject myself to the fact that I was begging for her forgiveness, because I still had some pride left, so I continued to watch TV. Although in reality, my head was completely out of what was on the screen, and all I was thinking about was her and what she had caused by not being able to shut the fuck up. It was then that I noticed Maya's laptop still lying open on the desk next to my computer. She had stormed off and obviously forgot to take it. With it, I noticed that Maya had left her school report still open in a Word document. So I decided to go through it, thinking I could help her with it, and that would be my silly way of apologizing to her. The report was titled, "Be with your loved ones even when they are dead." This was not so surprising, as I knew the type of person Maya was, and the fascination she had with dark things, death among them. But it was also disturbing because of the circumstances that had just occurred on the balcony. I flipped through the report and found that she was talking about her relationship with Matt, and how she wasn't internally happy after what happened, and talked about how much she needed some kind of closure. I became increasingly anxious as I read the report. She detailed her past relationship with Matt, and made it very clear that she missed him terribly. As I read more parts of the report, I became progressively more disturbed, but also very concerned, especially when I came across a part where she talked about being able to reconnect with her ex-boyfriend through a satanic blog she found online. To sum up what she said, she was basically implying that you would have to go to the last place the person was alive and die the same way, and that way, you could reconnect with them in the afterlife. At that moment, everything that had happened started to hit me over the head. What he said to my dad at dinner, his strange behavior the last few weeks, the unfortunate conversation we had on the balcony, it all came to me, and for some reason I started to have a terrible feeling. I started to panic and called Maya's cell phone over and over again. Seeing that I had dialed about 6 times without getting any kind of answer, my heart started to race and my breathing was out of control. Any trace of grogginess that might be left from what I had smoked earlier just disappeared, and I started to spin around in my head thinking about the possible place where Maya would be at that moment. I wanted to think with all my might that I was simply overreacting, but for some reason I was certain that was just what I was trying to do at that moment. After 10 unanswered calls, Mala finally picked up the phone and said, "What do you want?" in a voice full of disdain and hatred. I tried to pretend I didn't know anything about the report and said, "Maya, please come back. I'm sorry for everything that happened. I'm sorry for everything I said. I was a complete idiot and you can take it out on me all you want, but please come back." I was trying to sound normal, but inside my heart wanted to burst out of my chest. That's when I heard her start sobbing and she said, "I'm sorry, Jack, but I made a decision and there's no turning back now." Then, at that very moment, I began to hear the sound of a train honking from a distance. My heart stopped. Then I yelled out to him, "Maya, where the hell are you? Where you should have been all along, Jack?" I could hear the sound of the train getting louder and louder, as if it was coming right at her. I was about to freak out and started screaming, "Maya, get the hell out of there now, Maya, please, I'm sorry, please don't do this, please." At that point, I was desperately trying to stop her from what I knew she was about to do. I swear to God, I have never felt so desperate and helpless in my life. I literally felt like reaching over the phone and getting to where she was and pulling her away from the train tracks, because I knew she was there. But not only did I not have time, but I didn't even know where exactly she was, since the exact location where Matt's body was found was never revealed. "Maya, I'm sorry. Get away from there, please, please, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, Maya, please respond." I couldn't find any more words. I don't know how many times I apologized to her, trying to change her mind. But then she said, "See you later, Jack. It's time for me to meet Matt. I'm sorry." And that was it. She hung up the call, and in a way I was grateful for that, as it saved me from having to carry the memory of listening to the exact moment when the train hit her and took her life. At that moment, I called 911 and reported what had happened, but I knew that the only thing they could recover, if anything, was Maya's lifeless body, and so it happened. She made a terrible decision, but it was me who was carrying the guilt and the pain of what happened. And even though it's been over 5 years and I've had a couple of other relationships since then, I don't think I'll ever forget Maya, even though her heart clearly belonged to someone else.